Part 6. The Gamble. Maya held the orb tightly, its swirling mist reflecting in her wide eyes. She could feel its power coursing through her, like holding the weight of a storm in her hands. Kale stood before her, calm but unyielding, his silver eyes glinting with predatory intent. "Come now, Maya," Kale said, his voice like silk wrapped around steel. "You've played your part. Hand over the orb, and I'll keep my promise. I'll send you home." Her instincts screamed at her to comply, but something about Kale's demeanor froze her in place. The way he watched her, calculating, expectant, made her stomach churn. "What happens if I give this to you?" she asked, her voice shaking. Kale's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "That's none of your concern. You've done well, and your reward is freedom. Isn't that what you want?" Maya's eyes narrowed. "You don't seem like the type to give something for nothing. What are you going to do with it?" Kale's calm veneer cracked, his eyes darkening. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl. That artifact belongs to me. Its power is far beyond your comprehension, and it will consume you if you keep holding it." Maya took a step back, clutching the orb to her chest. "Then maybe you shouldn't have sent me to get it if you didn't want me to see how much you want it." Kale's smile disappeared entirely. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of her, his hand gripping her wrist. The mark on her arm burned fiercely, and she cried out. "Do you think you have a choice in this?" he hissed. "I own you, Maya. That mark binds you to me. If you don't hand over the orb, I'll rip it, and your soul, out of your body." But as his grip tightened, the orb pulsed, its light flaring bright enough to force Kale to release her and step back with a snarl. The pain in her wrist faded, replaced by a sudden clarity. She stared at the orb, realizing it wasn't just power, it was alive, sentient in some way. And it didn't want Kale. Maya stood tall, her fear melting into resolve. "You lied about sending me home, didn't you?" Kale straightened, his expression unreadable. "Careful, Maya, you don't know what you're meddling with." "Maybe not," she said, her voice steady, "but I know enough to realize that whatever you're planning with this orb can't be good for anyone." Kale's form began to shimmer, his shadow expanding outward like a storm. The ground trembled beneath his feet. "You think you can defy me? You're nothing but a mortal, a pawn. Give me the orb, or I'll tear this entire realm apart." Maya's heart pounded, but she refused to back down. She could feel the orb responding to her, its power merging with her own. She didn't fully understand it, but she trusted it. "Not today," she said, raising the orb high. Kale lunged, but before he could reach her, the orb unleashed a blinding light that engulfed them both. Maya felt herself being lifted off the ground, the world around her dissolving into white. A voice, soft, ancient, and kind, whispered in her mind, "You've chosen well, Maya. Hold fast to your courage." When the light faded, Maya found herself standing in a vast, empty void. Kale was gone, and so was the crimson sky. Before her stood the shadowy figure that had given her the vial. Its red eyes glowed softly as it inclined its head. "You've disrupted the balance," it said, a trace of amusement in its voice. "Kale will not forget this." Maya tightened her grip on the orb. "Let him come. I'm done being a pawn." The figure chuckled, spoken like someone who has no idea what they've just started. The void began to shift and fade, and Maya felt herself being pulled away. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her bedroom, the antique mirror cracked but whole. The orb was gone, and so was the mark on her wrist. But as she stared at her reflection, she noticed something different. Her eyes, once dark brown, now gleamed with a faint silver light.